I'm Chris from All Things Good and Nerdy, a proud member of the Good and Geek Network, just like the show you're listening to right now. The opinions expressed are those of the individual hosts. Make sure you check out all the other great podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com and get ready because geekiness begins in 3, 2, 1.
And we're rolling with episode number 124 of Better Podcasting. Today, we hone your presentation skills.
In this week's Better Podcasting download, we hone in on my experience with Pinecast.
In this week's Better Podback, we share what your fellow listeners had to say to us.
And finally, I'll give you a bit of an update on my Zoom L12 click issue. It's just a little one, though. Lauren, start the show now.
Welcome to Better Podcasting, a show where we talk about podcast tips, tools, and best practices to help you succeed with your podcast. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we podcast purely out of the love and fun of it. Podcasting is our hobby, and we recognize that it's yours too. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. Here's your host for the show, Stephen John Drew and Stargate Pioneer.
Welcome to episode 124 of Better Podcasting. I am Stephen John Drew, and with me, of course, is Stargate Pioneer.
Whoa, Steven, what's that in front of you? Did you shrink your BP-40? Did you have Ant-Man do a number on that thing?
I did. I just compressed the BP-40 down. No, for those of you not watching the video side of things, I am using a different microphone today. And I'll be honest, it's one I've had for like a year now, and I almost forgot about it. It is the Heil PR781. This is one that is advertised as being a podcast microphone. What the exact wording is that it is a studio microphone that is a dynamic desk microphone for elite transceivers and podcasting. So what I like to do is just ignore the part that said transceivers and instead say that it is a dynamic desk microphone for elite podcasting. So that's what I like to think of it as. But yes, it is the PR781. It's not a microphone regularly talked about within the podcasting world, but I'm looking forward to using it for a little while, seeing what I think about it, and then, of course, comparing it to the PR40 that I do have as well. And I think it'll be a fun little test to do. So you'll hear me sound a little bit different over the next few weeks, and unless I listen back to this episode and go, wow, that's terrible. So we'll find out.
It is a key microphone that is used from Bob Heil. Bob Heil actually developed it specifically for ham radio developers, and they thought, hey, this would fit well with podcasters as well, because I think the Heil PR40 was getting a little bit bad press, a little bit. So he's like, I need to make something that'll fit a little bit better. So we'll see what it sounds like. Ultimately, do a little comparison and go from there. But that is what we do here on Better Podcasting. We take a look at different things, whether it's software, whether it's hardware, microphones, whether it's processes that will make your hobby podcast better.
And by the way, we're going to run a little bit of a contest where you don't win anything but recognition. But I want the listener to tell us, can you find the connection between the Heil PR781 and the wonderful wind chimes that Stargate Pioneer has previously mentioned on this show? If you go to youtube.com/Gonna Geek Gear, I believe, is where there is wind chime review. But in any case, SP has some wind chimes, and we want you to tell us, what is the Heil PR781 connection to said wind chimes? And you can email us to contest@betterpodcasting.com, and we'll choose one lucky winner to win recognition. That's all they're going to win.
Looking forward to everybody's responses. And something else that people should give their responses in for is how I saved your podcast. We know that you go through extraordinary measures every week out there to save your podcast in order to put it out. Yes, you listener, that's who we're talking about. And we want to hear your story to share with the class on how you saved it so that other people can replicate your fine work.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and move on into our main topic. Here we go. Often new podcasters enter into their shows not knowing what type of host or presenter they want to be or are naturally, right, SP?
Yeah, taking a little time to self-reflect about what fits your personality best and might help you play to your strengths while working on aspects of your hosting that you want to improve and aspire to, no matter what stage of podcasting you're in, whether you're a new podcast, you've been podcasting for a while, whatever. Podcasters should consider how engaging they are to their audience and what on-mic personality best fits the topic and message they are conveying. This is especially important coming off our episode last week on knowing what your audience, who they are and what they want. So last week we delved into that, and to a certain extent, your audience is going to help you define how to conduct yourself on the microphone. It's not just topics, it's how you conduct yourself as well. And truthfully, we hope that this isn't going to be too far a departure for how you really truly are off microphone, because what audience want the most is for you to be yourself. But then how do you present yourself might connect better with your audience if you modify it just a little bit. So things like, how do you tell stories? Should you do your best stand-up comic routine? Should you be that NPR newscaster here on Better Podcasting? Or should you moderate the discussion? If your podcast has multiple hosts, what's the best mix and which part should you play? So yes, we've mentioned this before in Better Podcasting's episodes 11 through 13, but we wanted to take the time today to look into the personality portion of hosting a little bit more in depth that we didn't cover back then, and how to assess your hosting approach once you started, and some of the pitfalls that we'd recommend that you'd avoid. So first, we're going to start talking about different types of hosts, right, Stephen?
Right, like we're going to talk about Pinecast and Libsyn and Podbean, that type of host, right?
No, I'm talking about presenter, your host, your actual podcaster. Yes, yeah, I know we have to define that, don't we?
Sorry, yeah. But perhaps the easiest way to talk about this topic is looking at a typical 3-person hosted show. This type of format has worked well for morning radio shows for a very long time, and you can often see this in different sports announcing booths and even on things like Top Gear and the Grand Tour. It's a trifecta, and all of those wonderful shows do bounce off of this 3 type of host personality. Typically, these hosts fit different types of on-air personalities, and because of that, it ends up gelling together. For example, you might find that there is one that is the producer or the main play-by-play commentator. So this is someone who often steers the conversation, moderates the discussions, will often be quite opinionated, of course, and leads the listener or the viewer, in the case of Top Gear, down a certain path of the show. You also might have a color commentator or a secondary analyst, and these people usually provide certain stories and experience that helps illustrate this to the listener and connect with them on a more humorous level. They often do bank on that humor to provide that secondary soundboard style of approach. And they also, of course, give that main host a much needed break, because let's just be honest, that if SP was talking for an hour, it would be very tough on him.
It would be, and it's why I don't do a solo show. I like pinging off of hosts, by the way. So a second host or color commentator, secondary analyst, that's all great. And also, these sorts of shows also have a personality called a sideline reporter, or just the facts guy, basically. And that, or news reporter, in that individual brings the information out, helps settle debates with facts, brings forward little known facts or hard to find information, and perhaps might be either a little older or younger, or maybe a different gender, to help appeal to a larger audience base. That helps as well. So this is not all inclusive, by the way, but you can have different variations of this trifecta host thing. But this is just illustrating how 3 different hosts could play back and forth on a podcast, and what their personalities could be. So there's a lot more personalities than what we just gave out. So you can be an out and out comedian. You could be labeled a storyteller, where the only thing you do is you really tell stories either about your experience or other things that you've learned. You could just be the average guy, the guy on the street sort of thing. You could be a blue collar, white collar. You could be affluent. You could have a lot of experience or be an expert. You could be the salesman or the entrepreneur. That's definitely a style that's on podcasting. You can be inspirational, like a TED Talk sort of person. That's awesome. Or educational. Like if you're doing an educational based podcast, that would be a great personality to be. Being an educator or an orator is a definite skill set all on its own. So that's why I'm going to put it on there. And there's tons more, but that's the point, is that there are personalities to have on the microphone, and you can be one of those personalities that best fits your information and your audience.
Yes, like I'm Al Roker. That's my personality.
So what's the weather like, Al?
I'm going to refrain from a joke. But personality-wise, you obviously are a certain type of person naturally, but you also want to identify what personality you want to be and which personality fits your show best. Now, before we continue, let's say what we say on here all the time is that a good podcaster is authentic. You want to make sure that you are authentic with your show. Authenticity helps build a connection with your listener, and they will feel that. And also, unless you're a really, really, really good actor, the odds are you're only going to be able to fake it for so long. So you want to keep that in mind as you ask yourself this question. Now, it's also important on the flip side to remember that everybody in life has ambitions of some form, and sometimes those ambitions are to do with just this: growing yourself or your personality, expanding your horizons. That part of ambition applies to all sorts of areas within your life, and your personality and developing that is definitely something that is legitimate, and it's okay to want to develop yourself further. Have you ever heard of that person who has decided to take an improv class? Yeah, the odds are that person has that inside of themselves, that they want to be able to improv more, but they haven't really honed in on those skills. So they are somebody who has recognized that that's an area of their personality that they'd like to grow. And the same thing applies for your podcasting. There might be something that you want to go ahead and expand on.
And just because you yourself aren't growing in a specific area doesn't mean that you aren't being yourself. That trait might be there that you want to grow, but it's just not harnessed or tapped into. Look, you know yourself better than anybody else. And if you just can't get there from here, then just don't do it because you're trying to be authentic. But when you listen to your show back, or possibly you get some feedback, pay attention to what areas that you need to consider if you want to develop that area for yourself. So if you've shown any sign of this particular trait, the odds are you've got it in you somewhere, and all you need to do is just go through the experience and develop it over time.
And one thing that can help you with trying to decide this is to allow yourself to be vulnerable. Allow yourself to step outside of your comfort zone for a minute and realize that you might have that untapped potential. If you're honest with yourself, you can hopefully break through that comfort level and work on developing that untapped level. It's really hard sometimes to step outside of your box. I've heard a lot of podcasters who present themselves very forward on their show, but in person, they're kind of a little antisocial to a degree. They don't like to be in that scenario. And that's somebody who has tapped into that area of them that is a little bit more of a presenter, and they recognize that that's a trait within them. But it took a little bit to get into that. So absolutely, you got to be vulnerable and realize that just because you're not comfortable with something doesn't mean you can't use it.
No. And you can use it by doing research on that area or that personality type that you want to actually enhance, be a better host, be a better presenter. If you want to be funnier, start listening to shows that has a host exactly like this, and think about what you can do and relate to and modify it to your personality. There is formal training available, those master classes that we've all gotten ads on online lately. Yeah, you could take a class like that. You could take a local improv class. You can take just a normal college or a post-secondary life skill class on presentation skills. You can join the Toastmasters, and they're all about public speaking and being able to express yourself in group situations. So another thing is, just like we talked about last week, you have to make sure that whatever personality trait you're trying to bring out, it is appropriate for your show. And the odds are you're not just going to be a one-trick pony. Like, you're not going to be, even if you're a comedian, you're not going to be laughing all the time. Yeah, look at Steven, isn't he funny? He's got a smaller mic than he had last time. Look at his mic flag, it's flashing and everything. Oh, that's so funny. He's hypnotizing everybody with it. Yeah, you're not going to be like that the entire time. So part of it is reading your audience, which we talked about last week. And perhaps there's something to dial up on one show, and then the next show you got to dial back on it just because the topic or the situation is a little bit different. So yeah, this all happens. And on Better Podcasting, I play the straight man. I'm the guy that brings you guys the facts. I'm the guy that just is the average podcaster. But over on Gonna Geek, Steven, you've labeled me as something else.
Yeah, over on the GonnaGeek.com show, he's known as Seductive SP. So he a whole different personality over there.
It's not true. However, I will tell you the truth that on the Starling Tribune, that podcast has been going on for 6 years now, and I have had a bevy of different hosts through that entire run, and I have had to transition from the color commentator to the producer presenter and then to the secondary analyst. So I have done all sorts of different roles on that show. So if you are versatile and able to do that and able to do it successfully, and I'll tell you a little hint, I'm more successful at different types of hosting than others, then the more versatile you can be in different podcast situations.
Now, when you are wanting to start embarking up this tree, that's the word, right? It's embarking up this tree. You want to also assess whether or not it's working for you. So you've identified who you want to be, and who you want to develop yourself to be. And you want to check in with yourself is this working for your show or not? And one way that you can do this is by specifically listening for this quality when you preview back your show. So instead of listening for all the other technical things, listen to your personality. Do you think that it's coming across well, or do you think that it's just a complete misstep? Also, you can ask somebody to be objective and give you some feedback on that. For example, maybe you do know somebody who is a comedy writer and they want to give you a bit of feedback on a comedy bit that you did. Or you might want to avoid actually going to your mom or your wife or somebody that's a little bit more biased and asking them, because they're probably not going to give you that objective take.
But you know who is objective? It's your kids. They'll be surprisingly, shockingly honest with you. So if you want to open up to your kids and say, hey kids, what you think? You might actually be surprised what they actually say. But whoever you get your feedback from, pay extra attention to that and pay extra attention to all of your feedback and responses. Like, if people are all of a sudden complaining about your shows, your hosting style that you've changed to just might not be working. And another thing, you should ask your co-host. I mean, the last thing you want is your co-host hate podcasting with you. I've been in situations where I've had a co-host that just wasn't starting to fit in because either the show had changed or they had changed or something along those lines. And it just wasn't working. You got to talk to that co-host, because if you don't, and you end up in a really bad situation, you could end up arguing on the air, especially on a live show, and you don't want that. So make sure you talk back and forth to your co-host. They also should be surprisingly honest with you, as long as you set the tone correctly and go into it as a learning experience rather than I'm going to cut you down experience. So make sure you set the tone for those discussions. Now, Steven, there's some pitfalls to be aware of when you're talking about hosting personalities.
Right. And one of the big ones here is going to sound a little bit contradictory to what we said. But again, we're talking about tapping into that untapped potential. And what the big pitfall is trying to change who you are at the core. Yes, you're growing these areas, this untapped potential, but you don't want to sit there and try to change the core of yourself, because now you're into a faking it situation. And again, how long are you going to be able to last on that? For example, I'm probably never going to give just a straight-laced news show. If I ever did a news show, there's going to be an area or a level of sarcasm in there, because that's who I am. I'm not going to sit there and just read the news. SP, on the other hand, he'll never end up being like a hippie from the 70s. He'll be a hippie from the 60s.
I won't be a hippie. I won't even be a hipster. That's sorry. That's just not my personality. And another thing to be aware of is you might become intolerable. It's all well and good to joke around, have some fun, but don't be rude. Unless, of course, that's your show and you're being rude the whole time. Most of the time, though, audiences don't want to hear rudeness over and over and over again. So make sure you're not completely turning off your audience. And don't lose any credibility that you've already gained. For example, if today you've had a fairly serious show, right, and you've gotten a lot of facts and information out there, and then all of a sudden you switch to some wacky, hey, Stephen, we're here at Better Podcasting number 123. You might get judged from people, and they're not going to take it seriously anymore because it just isn't you, or it's not what they signed up for.
Yeah, so you definitely want to consider all of these things when you do launch a podcast or you are thinking about how you want to grow your podcast. And we're sure you've had some experience with this. How have you formed your personality on the show? What have you found worked for you? What did you find was something that was maybe some untapped potential that surprised you that now is part of your everyday podcasting life? Please do let us know all of these things. What's been your experience by getting in touch with us through any of the ways. You can always find us at BetterPod on Twitter. You can go ahead and find us at betterpodcasting.com or head on over to facebook.com/betterpodcasting. And please do get in touch with us because we love your feedback. But let's go ahead and move on to our download where we're going to talk about Pinecast.
Welcome to this week's Better Podcasting Download.
All right, this has been in the hopper for a little while. The hopper, right, SP?
Yeah, we've been hopping around this for quite some time. I remember, like, Steve, we got to talk about this. And he's like, I'm not ready. Steve, we got to talk about this. I'm not ready. Steven, oh, never mind. I'll just leave it alone until you're ready. And today, right before the show, he's like, hey, SP, I'm ready. So here we go. Here we're going to talk about Pinecast.
Okay, so Pinecast. We wanted to get some firsthand experience with Pinecast because let's be honest, it's a good price. It's something that's been talked about a lot more in recent and overall had pretty decent reviews from what we were hearing. So I decided that I've got the wonderful GonnaGeek.com show that I like to experiment with. I like to occasionally use it to experiment with things. And so I decided to try to put some media up on Pinecast, sign up for the account, and give it a shot for a few weeks. Now, there's your full disclaimer right there, is I gave it a few weeks shot, and I didn't do it over a prolonged basis, but I did see enough that I thought it was worth talking about on Better Podcasting. So let's start off with some pros. Well, number one, I found it super easy to use from registration to going and setting up the podcast. The walkthrough seemed very, very simple. And also there was a lot of documentation available on there as I walked through it. If I had a question, I was able to go into the search and I was able to find the information. Also, a nice pro, this is something that's regularly talked about within the world of podcasting, is that if you use their site, just like many of the other providers, you can use a custom domain or a custom subdomain. And again, there's easy documentation on how you do this. So if you want to go ahead and use a custom domain that goes right to your site, you don't need to email their support or anything. You just walk through the wizard and next thing you know, you're getting it set up. In that documentation, they did a good job of outlining some of the main domain registrars. So like GoDaddy, Namecheap, I think they had Hover in there. They had a little bit of how to set up what you needed to do technically on the domain panel and what you needed to do on Pinecast. It also had a really neat feature where it automatically will pull album art from your MP3. We've talked a lot about the reverse, where you can update your ID3 tags within your MP3 from the information that is on the actual panel for your media host. This would pull art from the actual MP3 file. So if you are in the habit of encoding things ahead of time, it will pull that in automatically. Also, the statistics, I will say, I found them overall to be pretty easy to understand and pretty easy to read. Accuracy, I don't know. I can't speak on accuracy because that's not something that I looked at that level of things, but it seemed sort of in line with Blueberry because I did couple it with Blueberry. Now, what about some of the cons that I saw? Well, unfortunately, one of the major cons all stems from the core way that it operates. The way they track the show is primarily based off of a redirect on their site that also uses a little bit of a extra tag. You ever see when you enter a website address and you see like there's a question mark on there and then there's some other information? That's how they do a lot of the tracking rather than like the subdomain slug. So when you go to something like Libsyn, you see that you just go to traffic.libsyn.com and they end up redirects over and it pulls information different ways. With Pinecast, there are certain elements that use this question mark, such as determining where it's coming from, like the RSS feed and stuff like that. Now, what happens with this is there's also a separate redirect URL that generates essentially a randomly numbered / named MP3 that then ends up forwarding over to your main MP3. So for example, let's say that the MP3 that I was using was named gg200.mp3. If I uploaded that to Pinecast, front facing, like through the website, or if you were to click on it, you're going to see a different URL than that. And what ends up happening with that is that redirects, of course, over to the proper one. So the actual file being downloaded is still GG200. But where this is a problem is if you couple it with something like Blueberry Stats. When I embedded that into my feed in Blueberry, I saw that random name rather than gg200.mp3. And I can tell you that seeing A37B46Q3LPT.mp3 is useless to me. Absolutely
Wasn't that
useless.
the self-destruct code on the USS Enterprise in Star Trek?
Yes.
The Wrath of Khan?
Yes, it definitely was. So that's a bit of a problem. Now, there are some ways that you can use the actual name, but then you also need to have those variables after it. So there's a whole bunch of different embeddable methods to one file, which from a user perspective is super confusing. And also, if you don't get it right, it doesn't track your data. So you know how I mentioned that weird, I'll call it a dirty MP3 label, redirects over to the proper clean, the gg200.mp3. What ends up happening if I just let it redirect in my browser, find what that final MP3 URL is, and then copy that and embed that, what ends up happening is it doesn't track your stats right. So you have to use one of those other options, which are not the best in the world, especially if they cause problems with downloading, which is what actually happened with somebody who I had try this. I had wonderful Neil, the guy that you heard at the beginning of the Better Podcasting Download. That's Neil. He tried this from his Mac, and on one occasion at least, he ran into a problem where when I had that question mark equals whatever the heck the variable was, it didn't download right. He had to go in and strip that from that. Now, full disclosure, I went and I'm like, we got to find out what's up. And I gave him a whole bunch of different URLs to try, and then those worked successfully. So I don't know, was it a bug of his browser that day? He was using Safari. Did Safari update in between? Was it a server problem? I don't know. In any case, but on at least one occasion, he had to strip that information out, which ended up, of course, causing problems. So because I didn't get the stats. So a little bit frustrating with that. And honestly, those are the biggest problems that I have with it at this time. I wish they would go to something that was cleaner in the front end. Something like Podbean or Libsyn, how they do that, where it's one URL that is straightforward. And then I'm assuming in the back, there's something that's pulling all that referrer information and data and sorting it properly, rather than depending on unique tags or giving you a really weird MP3 file name. So that is the biggest showstopper for me. And if they could change that and make it operate like the other ones, I think it would be a much better service than it is. I will say that there's one other weird thing that I saw that I'd like to see them change. So you know how I said that you can use a custom domain or a custom subdomain for the website? Yeah, it's for the website. So like if I ended up setting up betterpodcasting.com to be hosted with them, that would only be as good for the website. So the media would still end up going through the Pinecast URL rather than through my custom domain, which is another thing I'd like to see them change. Because if I'm going to use a custom domain, I'd like it to be across everything. And I think that is something that if we're really going to embrace that feature, they should give me that option so that my MP3 shows under betterpodcasting.com. You know, for a company that's only been around a few years, I'm pretty impressed with what I'm seeing. They just still have a little bit further to go. And the price is definitely right on it. But the question is, how long can that price remain right, in my opinion, because they are quite a bit cheaper than everybody else.
And I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but Stephen, do you remember approaching them about the IAB compliance for the statistics?
Yeah, they did say that they were IAB compliant.
Okay.
They did say that. Now, okay, while we're talking about that, there were variations between Blueberry and between them, but we've heard of that before. So, you know, IAB compliance in the grand scheme of thing is a new thing. So we're getting pretty close. I personally, my random opinion is I do expect variation still from company to company.
And there's going to be that because there is some variation in the coding. I mean, everybody's got their own codes to pull the statistics. So there's going to be some variation, but as long as you're compliant to the guidelines, the IAB statistics guidelines 2.0, I think that'll be good. Nobody is actually certified yet. They're going to start certification process, I believe, within the next year or so. And truthfully, it's for advertisers, and for us as hobby podcasters, it's more like comparison to yourself. Like, is your show growing over time? Is your downloads per episode for the first 30 days going up? Because your overall downloads should be going up because you have more podcasts. So even if you're only getting 100 downloads per show forever, your tail, as long as you have all those old episodes out, once you get to 100 episodes, your monthly total is going to be higher because people are going to be downloading some of your old shows as you go along too. So your real key indicator is the monthly downloads per episode. But Pinecast, it was a good option for a while, and it was great for you to take a look at that, Stephen, because there's a lot of interest in Pinecast.
Yeah, and they do offer unlimited shows for the $5 a month, so that is a bonus. Now, again, I question how long that model can sustain, but I hope that they just make those change, because I was pretty happy overall with what I saw, and I definitely wish them the best for sure, because I want to see someone else come into there. I think competition is good for consumers, and I do hope that they continue to grow and get to be the level of Libsyn and Podbean. So that's
and
my
let's be honest, podcast has been around for what, 14 years? It's going to be around for a few more years. Technology is continually adapting. So there could be somebody that comes along that's able to take advantage of a new technology a little bit faster, a little bit more adaptable than, say, Podbean or Libsyn or anybody else that's in this sphere right now. And if it's Pinecast, so be it. Let's get adaptable. Let's move the industry forward. And that is what changes industry.
Absolutely. So if you got experience with Pinecast, let us know. We want to know how have things worked out for you. And you can let us know through any of the ways we previously mentioned, and just head on over to betterpodcasting.com. But let's go ahead and move into the Better Pod Back before I give you an update on the L12.
We received some feedback from our listeners in the past week, and we're going to run down a few of the notes that we received because we like to share with our audience. So the first tweet that we received like right after that we went off the air last time as we were live recording our podcasting episode number 123, and it was at Fun for Chew, that's CHU, and he says, "Hi at Gonna Geek. Been listening to at Better Pod for a few months now and love all the content that you guys create. I feel honored to be your 400th subscriber over on YouTube. Not sure if it means much, but I thought I'd share. Keep up the awesome work. Haha." This was awesome. This was an incredible tweet to receive. We shared it with our Better Podcasting guest host, I guess, Chris, over on the Gonna Geek Network, and he was just stoked about this to get up to 400 subscribers on the Gonna Geek YouTube channel. A year ago, I wouldn't have thought that the channel would keep growing, so it's awesome. that it does keep growing. Thank you to all our subscribers on YouTube and all our subscribers to the podcast as well. But as we continue to grow, let us know what we can do better for you, because we are adaptable to get a better show out for everybody.
And we did get a screenshot, by the way, and the screenshot, I gotta say, it doesn't prove anything, because the screenshot showed the subscribe button at $3.99. We never saw one that actually said 400. So maybe somebody in between the time of taking that screenshot actually subscribed, and you were the 401th. So, don't know.
Did you just ditz our 400 subscriber? Come on, man. Give him some congratulations.
I'm just being objective here. No, seriously, congratulations on being the 400th, and thank you very much. And now I will delete my 399 YouTube accounts. Also, we had Sean Cannell say, "Who are your favorite podcasters to listen to?" To which we had a response to that, didn't we?
Yeah, at Bandrew Says responded and said, at Doug Benson from Doug Loves Movies, by the way, at This Is Rad Pod, at Scott Ackerman, at IC Guild, at Bill Burr, at Podcast Engineer, and at Better Pod. Thank you very much, Blandrew.
So wait, the Better Podcasting itself is actually a podcaster? What are we? Are we just a figment of the imagination?
We're the monkeys that flip the switches.
We also had at Daddy-O_Ryan say special thanks to at Better Pod for their shout out on their most recent show and for the constructive/professional criticism of some opportunities for improvement on our sound. Greatly appreciate your time, and I love your show. At Stargate Pioneer and at Stephen John Drew. Daddy-O_Ryan, first off, SP gets the full credit. He did absolutely get involved with that topic with you. And again, kudos to both of you there. Thought that it was a phenomenal discussion and a way to be rational. Also, I will say thank you very much for tweeting us, and I'm glad that you like the show.
Also, we got another tweet from our pals. Stephen, are you ready?
Yes.
At AureliaPod. And at AureliaPod said, most of us use Podcast Addict too. Some of the features aren't as good as you described. Like, I don't think there is a smart rewind. It just rewinds a set amount. But I've used it from the start of my listening days, and I love it, especially because you can customize each show. And that was on the tail end of our podcast listening apps discussion that we've been having the last couple of weeks. And we got a shout out from basically a product that you talked about last time, Stephen. Say what?
Saycaster. I had to say it with you.
There you go. Say what, Saycaster. And check out Gonna Geek for super informative videos. And since we were critical of them, by the way, and they said, and we feel ya, podcasting is super saturated, but we're going to give it everything we got. Into that, we say, just like we did with podcasts, we want to see more competition in the pod space. So good luck to you.
Absolutely. So there you go. Those were your tweets from the week. We always want to hear from you. If you got something going on in your podcasting world, make sure to let us know, because you never know what little thing that you say might spur a new topic or might spur a conversation for the rest of our listeners and help them out. Please do get in touch with us through any of the ways, facebook.com/betterpodcasting, tweet us at betterpod, or just head on over to betterpodcasting.com. So now it's time to talk a little bit about the L12. It's a little bit of a tease this week, because it's what I like to do is tease things. But you might record. Okay, what's your question, SP?
I just want to qualify this. We're talking about the Zoom L12, which is a combination mixer and recorder, which Stephen has been using for the past few months now, since I want to say like October timeframe. And we've noticed some issues with it, and they seem to be exclusive to Stephen. So we're trying to figure out exactly what's going on.
Yes, the Zoom L12, I've been very impressed with it overall. And if you want to go ahead and check out the full review, you can. It's youtube.com/GonnaGeekGear. That's where the L12 review is. And it's got a lot of functionality for the $1. Now, it's not anything that you're buying out of the gate. It is a little bit more expensive of a product, but it has a lot of functionality. And overall, I've been pretty happy. If you haven't followed the saga of the Zoom L12, I had a bit of an issue where it was making almost a clipping, a very excessive clicking sound. And I say clicking in place of clipping because on the waveform, you would see a large clip, but it didn't sound like a usual clip. The best way to describe it is a large audible click. So this was something that I have actually been encountering for a while. And I sent the L12 off. And there was a whole backstory with that I might get into in a future review, but it came back and it still did it. So that was the backstory on it. So how have I solved this? Well, in the meantime, I've just been using Isotope's declicker to solve the problem. That's the way that I've been dealing with it, and it's been working fine. But it's still annoying, especially from a live experience. Now, there are a couple of words that I often say, and it makes it make this sound when I say it. SP, what is one of those words?
I would say the word that you found really hacks the L12.
It is. It is usually that word. And the reason why I'm not saying it is because I'm about to show you that I may have solved the problem. Steven hacked it. I hacked the L12. I attacked and hacked the L12. I am a hack. SP calls me a hack regularly because, let's be honest, I am a hack. Now that is with my possible hack implemented, that I hacked it. So now let's compare to the removed hack. Now I'm back to the other way, the old way, where I can say that I hacked it. I attacked the hack before I called myself a hack, because I am a hack. Because let's be honest, I clip and I attack the hack. So there you go. That is a comparison between the two. And I'm not ready yet to say my theory because this is the first week. This is just a discovery this past weekend while I was diagnosing another problem. But yeah, audio listener SP's making the drinky sign. But yeah, that is something that I will follow up in the future. But I wanted to tease that I may indeed have the solution or I may indeed have the hack which solves it.
And I'm looking forward to not hearing that awful overdriven click ever again. So it's been a long road to get to the point where we're understanding what it might or might not be, because we don't know for sure if we've isolated exactly what it is. So Steven's going to run some more tests and we'll get that out in a video and probably talk about it in the upcoming Better Podcastings.
Awesome. So there you go. That is going to take us to the end of episode 124 of Better Podcasting. I'm Stephen John Drew saying I'm on Heil PR781. Will I be next week? Time will tell.
And I'm SP saying I am going to be so glad not to be sick next week. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Better Podcasting. We want to hear from you. You can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. If you like the show, please consider giving us a 5-star review in iTunes. We encourage you to check out all of the other geeky podcasts available at gonnageeknetwork.com. This has been a Gonna Geek production. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next week.